Rig exercises, step module. So the first exercise we'll look at is the Romanian deadlift on a step. Obviously this is still working the lower body to a certain degree, but also the posterior core, the low back. Plus point of doing a Romanian deadlift on a step is, as we see with the sandbag here, it does give us a larger range of motion. It means that we can kind of go further down than being restricted if we were stood on the floor. So the sandbag lift onto high step is a combination of a low body, core and upper body kind of movement. We're going to lift it up to the chest and then place it on a high step. This can be done with a core bag, power bag as we see with the video, or with a kind of sandbag or slam ball, anything ideally that's not going to roll off the step when we place upon it. We can then vary the position of the body, so we do it as an oblique lift. So position the body sideways on to the step, we're going to lift up to the chest, and then we add this kind of rotation in order to place the sandbag or whatever object you're lifting onto the high step that's to the side of you. Here we have our supine long bridge. So this is an isometric exercise, good for the glutes, hamstrings, and also the low back as well. So place the heels on the step, usually about a foot or so off the ground, and we then lift the hips up and hold it. So we show you two variations here. The first one is the isometric, where we're just holding that set position for a period of time. We can then add small little pulsing if you want to add a slight variation to that static exercise. So we see the supine long bridge from the single leg pattern. So there's a few variations here. We can either do it just with the actually moving, where we eccentrically lower just on that one leg, or we can keep just a single leg bridge and do both the eccentric and concentric movements, or we could just hold it isometrically. There's a few little variations depending on what you want to get out of it. All of these drills very good for improving hamstrings, low back and glute activation. And here we have our supine hip bridge. So we start with the feet on the edge of the step, hips nice and close, and then we're going to bridge the hips upwards, ideally so that the knees, hips and shoulders form a nice straight line. Now you can do it with the arms on the ground. This makes it significantly easier because you actually press the ground, press downwards using the lats to kind of lift the hips up. So ideally, as you see with the video, we would want the arms to be across the shoulders, and that just helps to focus on the actual lower body, the glutes, hamstrings and adductors, which is what we're trying to actually focus on. And again, adopting the same principle that we saw previously, we can do this eccentrically on the single leg. So we lift up with two. Once we're in that top position, we then lift one leg off, and then we lower slowly down, just using the one leg at a time. Again, glutes, hamstrings, adductor magnus, all trained with this particular exercise. Adding in some rotation, we can do the same bridge, but then we add a crossover reach, quite popular with some of the combat fighters, particularly when we're doing kind of ground strengthening work. So we roll onto one shoulder and reach up and across using the opposite arm. So again, working a lot of the same lower body and core musculature that we worked previously, but now adding the rotation component in there as well. Onto a side plank. So this is a progression from a side plank on the floor. The body, as you see, is now in a horizontal position rather than being slightly angled if the feet were on the ground. So that makes it harder. Both feet, in this case, on the step. It's a long side plank, and we're just holding it isometrically for duration. So, as you know, it's going to be working our obliques, lateral hips, and a little bit on the shoulder stabilizer of that low arm. But yeah, pretty much all the kind of lateral myofascial line musculature is going to be working here. As a progression, we can add a lateral flexion or a hip drop to that movement. So get into that side plank position, lower the hips down towards the ground, and then with lateral flexion, and then form that lateral flexion to take us back up into a horizontal position. To progress, we can then go into a single leg side plank. So we can either perform that with the lower leg, so we lift the top leg off and hold that isometrically. And again, ideally we want to be able to hold that for a good 20 seconds or so. Or we can add a variation where we're going to be doing it with the upper leg, which is what we'll show you next. So the upper leg is a fun drill, so we're going to pop the top leg or the upper leg on the step, the lower leg just hangs slightly below the step, and we're going to have to use the adductors, so the inner thigh muscles of this upper leg to hold this side plank position. Still going to be working the lateral core on the lower side, so in this case the left side, but we're going to be working, as you see with the image, the inner thigh muscles, the adductors on the upper right leg. Obviously the abductors of the lower leg aren't going to get worked with this one because that leg, in this case the left leg, is hanging in free space. Other drills where we can do things like seated V-tucks, so we'd sit on the step, take hold of the step with the hands, and we're just performing these kind of seated V crunches. It's obviously going to be working the anterior core and hip flexors. Other drills where we can perform planks, and then we can do planks with the hands on the step. In this case we see feet on the step. We can add chest taps into this, so we're trying to limit the lateral shift as much as possible. Obviously as we lift one hand off, that creates a frontal and transverse plane stress, and our core muscles need to control that. So it's going to be working anterior, and with the chest taps, a little bit of lateral core at the same time. And then other plank variations, we could do elbows to hands, so start off on our forearms or on our elbows, up into a kind of plank position with the arms extended, and we're just going up and down from that position. Same kind of thing that you do on the floor, we're just doing it with the feet elevated up to make it a little bit harder, with the feet elevated on the step. Other variations would include a single arm reach, so arms are extended this time, and we're just reaching upwards and forwards. Again, there's lots of little variations we could do. If you can position yourself where kind of near a cable, or using a band, we could do rows, or if you've got a couple of dumbbells or kettlebells, we can do renegade rows. Lots of little kind of plank type variations, or drills that you should be pretty familiar with. And then here we have plank walks. So this is just effectively stepping up and down from the floor up onto the steps. You don't want to position the step too high, but effectively, yeah, you just go in from the floor, usually just in front of the step. You can do it to the side, and we're just walking our hands up and down. So good for some of the pressing musculature, the shoulders, scapular stabilizers, and the anterior core. And then, see, we can do a variety of press-up type exercises. In this case, I'm going to show you more of a dynamic plyo press-up type movement. So we're going to have one hand on a low step, other hand on the ground. We perform a partial press-up, and then we drive upwards, keeping the hand that's on the step, but the other hand that's on the floor is going to drive upwards into the air. And obviously any kind of other press-up type movement you want to perform, you can do kind of obviously our tricep dips as well if you wish, but there should be a lot of pressing type exercises you can kind of perform, variations of the type of thing that you're seeing in front of you now. So on the review, presentations, make sure you watch all presentations for this module. For the guided learning practice, complete the guided learning practice for this module, details of which are on the learner management system. Practice the exercise yourself so you're happy with the techniques, and then also practice coaching the exercises to a colleague so you can look to get across the key information. You then want to also complete the guided learning submission for this module. And then the review questions. Make sure you complete the review questions for this module to ensure you've met the learning outcomes.